Amalgam Comics only ran for 24 issues, but the characters have firmly stuck in the minds of comic fans for over 20 years. What makes these characters so awesome? Let's find out. Amalgam was an imprint shared by Marvel and DC, and you may not really understand what an imprint is, and I'm going to try to answer it strictly in comic book terms. I know other forms of publishing use imprints, but I'm not talking about those. An imprint is a wholly owned subsidiary of one or more larger comic companies, but the line is given an imprint because it contains comics with either similar themes and styles, or because it's intended to appeal to a particular subset of the audience. Probably the best known imprint is Vertigo, a DC imprint that published Preacher, Y the Last Man, and Hellblazer, among many other titles. And these were books all considered somewhat literary and intended to appeal to older or more discriminating readers. But what really manages to capture fans' attention with Amalgam is that it was a shared imprint with Marvel and DC, the two biggest traditional comic publishers, frequently considered bitter rivals by much of the fandom. Amalgam had two runs of 12 issues each, one in 1996 and one in 1997, and this imprint was released amidst one of the biggest crossover events in comics, DC versus Marvel. This event will be a golden topic for a later episode, so stay tuned. What made Amalgam stand out, its gimmick if you will, was that an existing Marvel character was merged with an existing DC character to create a new mashup character with some characteristics of both. And this comic line moved past the fandom narrative of who would win if this guy fought that guy, and it led readers to daydream about what if someone had the powers of both of these folks. This mashup style, this blending of characters, is the inspiration for the imprint's name, Amalgam, because the dictionary definition of amalgam is a mixture or blend. It kind of means the same thing as Wuzzle, if any Wuzzles fans are watching. Marvel seems to have codified the Amalgam universe to a degree by giving it the designation of Earth 9602, but DC, to the best of my knowledge, has thus far failed to give it a designation of their own. Each issue was a one-shot, and each of the 24 issues was designated in issue number 1. There was a lot of fun Kfabe with this comic, and in case you're not familiar, Kfabe is a wrestling term which means working really hard to pretend something is real when it's not. But with these books, they were presented as if rather than being something new, they had in fact been around since the Golden Age, and had gone through both retcons and reboots, much as the characters they were based on had done in reality. One example of this amalgamation of comics history were references to Secret Crisis of the Infinity Hour, an amalgamation of Marvel's Secret Wars, DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths, Marvel's The Infinity Gauntlet, and DC's Zero Hour. They really went a long way with this gag, even having fake letter columns with the fans' hometowns formed by amalgamating the names of existing cities, like Cleveland and Tampa becomes Clampa. The whole setup occurred in Marvel vs. DC number 3. The DC and Marvel universes were shown being combined into one, the Amalgam universe, and the Amalgam comics were presented as the result of that. The given explanation is two physical incarnations of the respective comic book universes are brothers, and they suddenly became aware of each other after eons of slumber. To prevent the brothers from destroying each other, characters from each universe battled to determine which universe would survive. And like I said, we'll talk about that in a later video. When the battles were finished, neither universe was willing to go. To prevent their total destruction, the Spectre and the Living Tribunal created an amalgamated universe. And two characters within this universe, Access, a new character created just for the event, and Dr. Strange Fate, a combination of Doctor Strange, Dr. Fate, and Professor X. And they battled to determine whether the worlds would remain combined or divide back up into their own distinct entities. In the end, Access managed to separate the brothers with the help of the Amalgam Universe's superheroes. You see, before the merge ever happened, he had planted shards of the two universes inside Batman and Captain America. Once he discovered their amalgam counterparts, he used those shards to give the Spectre and the Living Tribunal the power to restore the two universes. Batman, Captain America, and Access were thus able to make the brothers realize that their conflict was pointless and the two universes were separated once again. You know the event was a really big deal because it made headlines in the Beaver County Times, and if it plays in Pennsylvania, it plays in Peoria. The story is okay, but the joy in Amalgam Comics is all about those characters, so let's run down as many as we can. We're going to talk about around 100 characters, so I'm going to try to go fast. Some were obvious combinations, others less so. Their aliases may have been one character's alone or a combination of the two. So let's get started. I think a good place to start is with Super Soldier. Super Soldier, real name Clark Kent, was an amalgamation of DC's Superman and Marvel's Captain America. When you look at this picture here, I've got to say when it comes to the mashup, the logo is a whole lot of Superman, but the actual character design is like 95% or more Captain America. I mean, it's just Captain America's costume. They've taken the cowl and pulled the top off, so you've got a little blonde hair going out of there, but that's still Steve Rogers' hair. He does have the Superman shield, but all in all, I think this looks way more Captain America than it does Superman. I think if they had taken the star off of Captain America's chest and maybe replaced it with Superman's S, that would have been a nicer little touch. Maybe, maybe not, just throwing that out there. Also, they could have considered a cape, though, you know, capes aren't always the best. Next up, almost the de facto sort of icon or logo for Amalgam Comics is Darkclaw. Darkclaw, also known as Logan Wayne, he's an amalgamation of DC's Batman and Marvel's Wolverine, therefore, you know, Logan from Wolverine, Wayne from Bruce Wayne. And if you look at this combination, first off, I mean, it is a beautiful combination. And one really nice thing about this, like if Captain America and Superman were mixed together for Super Soldier in like a 95-5 blend, this is the rare case, and I can't even explain how they've done it, but this is 100% Batman and 100% Wolverine. I mean, it's like that dress. Some people look at it and it's one color. Some people look at it and it's another. If you look at this picture and you want to see Wolverine, you're going to see Wolverine. You look at it and you want to see Batman, you're going to see Batman. The cowl is integrated perfectly. You've got Wolverine stripes there on the thighs. And of course, whenever you've got the Wolverine claws, that's like a 100% hit it out of the park. Characters that I wouldn't have originally thought might blend well together. I mean, Wolverine's power set, very different from Batman's. But if you look at it, it was probably around the most popular character from each comic company at the time. So you got to blend those together and get yourself a real moneymaker. Next up, we've got Deadeye. And in this picture, we have a couple of characters. We have Lethal, Deadeye, and Wired. But I want to focus primarily on Deadeye. Wired back there, you can see with that eye is, of course, a combination involving Cable, as well as another character from DC that we'll talk about in a bit. But Deadeye, I think Deadeye is a nice, good mix. You've got the red eye piece that comes from Floyd Lawton from Deadshot. You've got the wrist-mounted shooters that are absolutely Deadshot. But then you've got more or less the unaltered bullseye costume underneath with the black and white motif and the little swirls around the head. I'm going to say this is a nice 50-50 mix there. Next up, I want to show you a picture of Dr. Doomsday. And Dr. Doomsday is a combination of Doomsday and Dr. Doom. And in this picture here, I got to say, he's on those skis. He's got the ski poles with him. They're putting just a touch of black racer in this, though, even though it's not necessarily recognized as one of the influences in this amalgamation. You see him there. He's talking about being the personification of death in this panel. So there's absolutely some black racer. I think it's an okay mashup. I like Dr. Doom a lot better than I like Doomsday, but I guess because they've got that syllable in common, Doom, they thought they had to mix these two together. Dr. Strange Fate. Now, this character proves to be a central focal point of the Amalgam story. And Dr. Strange Fate, his real name is Charles Xavier, but he's clearly an amalgamation of Dr. Fate and Dr. Strange. They do give him Charles Xavier, Professor X's name, but when you look at this character design, I'm not seeing any Professor X there, but I will say it's an excellent combination of Dr. Strange's cape along with Dr. Fate's base layer and helmet. You put the Anka in his hand. This is kind of like Darkclaw, where if you really want to look and see Dr. Fate, you see it. You can also clearly see those Dr. Strange influences, but I am going to say this is more like a 70-30 split. This one is definitely more Dr. Fate than Dr. Strange. We've got another character here. Actually, we got two characters we want to look at. So Lethal, we took a peek at her just a little bit earlier. Lethal is an amalgamation of DC's Cheetah, the Barbara Minerva version, and Marvel's Kraven the Hunter, which is kind of a nice mashup right there. You can see, I think this is great. You keep the wild animalistic look of Cheetah. You got a little bit of the cape, vest, whatever you want to call there, the Kraven clothing going on. I think this is a good mix. Plus, there's some kind of irony like the Beast and the Hunter mixed together. Also in this panel, you'll notice a character called Dare the Terminator, also known as Slade Murdoch. Now, the issue here is it's a gender-flipped combination of Daredevil and Deathstroke. And I got to tell you, I'm not seeing much Daredevil at all in this. And also that picture's a little cheeky if you catch my drift. So I don't know. I guess it's the 90s. That sells a little bit. They got to put that hubba factor in there. But the biggest question when they're doing an amalgam character with Deathstroke is why on earth is it not Deadpool and Deathstroke? And you could call him Slade Wade or something like that. You know, that is one of your obvious choices. They'll make a lot of obvious choices. This is not one they've made. That character looks pretty good, but honestly, it just looks like a female version of Deathstroke, and we already have sort of a female version of Deathstroke. Next up is Night Creeper. Kurt Jack Ryder, an amalgamation of DC's Creeper, Jack Ryder, and Marvel's Nightcrawler, Kurt Wagner. And when you look at this, this is a really good blend. And these two characters lend themselves to blending together nicely. You change the coloration a little bit. You got a little bit of Creeper coloration, a little bit of Nightcrawler coloration to get sort of a new coat, if you will. The wild hair from the Creeper goes on there. They give him a little vest, change the color of the trim. The digits are changed. This one, though, I think maybe to my eyes, looks a little tiny bit more Creeper than Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler actually has powers that are very different from the Creeper, so they're not something you would naturally think would be blended together. But when it comes to the physical appearance, they do work well together, and I got to give the Nightcrawler a solid endorsement. The next character I want to show you is Skulk. And Skulk is an amalgamation of DC's Solomon Grundy and Marvel's Hulk. And for the most part, when I look at this, I'm pretty much just seeing Solomon Grundy. And Solomon Grundy, an older character than the Hulk, a Golden Age character versus the Hulk, a character who came around in the Silver Age. But like I said, I'm looking at this, I'm really just seeing Solomon Grundy here. The Hulk was gray originally, so maybe it's my own bias pushing me towards seeing Solomon Grundy. We do have the purple pants, so at least you got that. The hairstyle, maybe a little Hulk. The facial expression, maybe a little Hulk. But you could just label this as a picture of Solomon Grundy, and I think a lot of people would buy it as that. A really fun character was Spider-Boy, and Spider-Boy is a combination of Superboy and Ben Reilly. I just want to point that out. It's the Ben Reilly version of Spider-Man that comes into play, or the clone of Spider-Man. I usually think of him as Scarlet Spider, but it's Ben Reilly that comes into play during Marvel vs. DC, during the Superman vs. Spider-Man event, and of course, he is the amalgamation character. So this character is called Peter Ross, and I love the look here. It's fun. This is a character that would really kind of work well as an original character rather than an amalgamation. But I like that he's got the leather jacket that has that Superboy vibe to it. We've got him surrounded by this mashup version of the Legion of Superheroes, which is a strong tie with Superboy, though not necessarily the incarnation of Superboy that's inspiring this character. The face mask, the little domino mask that moves with the eyes, the fun in the lines on this picture. I got to say, this is a great one. I love the way that this costume integrated the Spider-Man logo along with the Superman logo in a way that Super Soldier didn't try to do between Captain America's star and Superman's S. So I'm giving this one a solid thumbs up. This one might be my favorite character because the design is great. Now, next up is Amazon. Amazon is a mashup of Wonder Woman, of course, Diana Prince from DC, and Marvel Storm, Aurora Monroe. The full name of Amazon is Princess Aurora of Themyscira, so they've managed to combine both of those characters' backgrounds there, and it's a solid character. I think how much you like this character really boils down to how much you like Storm. There is a whole lot more Storm going on here in this character design with the cape, the hair, the power set with the lightning behind her and the raindrops coming down. Of course, we do have At the core of the torso, Wonder Woman's pretty classic costume without any modifications. We have the bracers, we have the long boots that were often drawn on Wonder Woman, but still just the cape and the hair, that is such distinct hair that Storm has. I'm really getting way more Storm vibe out of Amazon than I am Wonder Woman vibes. The way you feel about this character will probably boil down to the way you feel about Wonder Woman versus the way you feel about Storm. If you prefer Wonder Woman, you're probably not going to like this character as much as you would if you prefer Storm. Big Question is a matchup that seems kind of random to me. Maybe it makes more sense to some of you folks. Don't hesitate to let me know in the comments. But Big Question, Edward Nygma Fisk, is a combination of DC's Riddler, Edward Nygma, and Kingpin from Marvel, Wilson Fisk. And basically, when I look at this, all that I'm seeing is Kingpin with a question mark on his face. The character of the character as he's presented, the way he holds himself, the things that he says, this feels way more Kingpin than Riddler to me. But at least they made a combination that wasn't obvious and tried to have a little bit of fun with that. I don't know if they came to a point where they had characters left, threw names in a hat and drew them out two at a time and forced them to mix together. Now this next character, Katsai, I love the way this character looks. Katsai Elektra Kyle is an amalgamation of DC's Catwoman, Selina Kyle, and Marvel's Elektra. And when I look at this character design, this looks like a 100% original character and a character that I love, a character that I could go with. This is excellent character design. You do have a little bit of the cat whisker thing going on with this helmet or cowl that Katsai is wearing, but that's a totally new piece of the costume that's been introduced. I don't really know that being part of Catwoman's style in the past, nor part of Elektra's. You do have one of the sais in her hands, and of course the name Katsai is spelled Catsai with a reference there to the sai, the famous weapon that Elektra is known for. We've got a little Frank Miller tape on the arms, and then it's just overall, like I said, it's two characters put together. It looks like a totally new character, and it also really looks nice. J. Jonah White is a character that combined J. Jonah Jameson and Perry White. I couldn't actually find a picture of J. Jonah White, but I have a picture of J. Jonah Jameson and Perry White right together. They look so much alike, I could probably just take a picture of either and say it was both. The only real key difference is that unfashionable mustache that J. Jonah Jameson has, and when I say unfashionable, I think you get what I'm talking about. Terra X was a combination of DC's Terra, known very well from the classic Teen Titans storyline, the Judas Contract, and Marvel's Terrax, a character that I know best for being a herald of Galactus. Both of those characters have earth manipulation or geomancer powers, so I think it makes a lot of sense that they would be combined together. And they give us a character that, I gotta say, looks fairly well blended between the two. Maybe it's more like a female version of Terrax, I guess I would say. Terra is just a young teen lady, so you don't see as much of her coming through in this picture, I guess. So I just stepped all over the argument I opened up with. Also, we can see in this panel another character called Pharaoh Man. Pharaoh Man Pyotr Rasputin is an amalgamation of DC's Pharaoh Lad and Marvel's Colossus, and it's kind of cool. A guy with magnetic powers and a guy with a metal body. Put those two together, it's pretty cool. The character looks really good, and at the end of the day, sometimes with comics, in particular 90s comics, if the character looks cool, that's like 95% of what they were going for. Wired is a character we got a little peek of earlier in the background of that Deadeye and Lethal picture that we were looking at. But Wired is a combination of DC's Manhunter, and I'm not talking about the Martial Manhunter. I'm talking about Chase Lawler, DC's Manhunter, and Marvel's Cable, Nathan Summers. As a result, Wired's name is Nathan Chase, and we also get a pretty good look here at Shatter Starfire. Shatter Starfire is a combination of Shatterstar and Starfire. Shatterstar, of course, from Marvel, Starfire from DC. And here, this is pretty much just Starfire. Starfire does have all the hubba hubba quotient, which we've already established was a big deal in the 90s. She does have just a hint of Shatterstar's headgear on there, and maybe just a tiny hint of Shatterstar style to her hair there. But otherwise, that is way more Starfire than Shatterstar. Abominite is an amalgamation of DC's Hellgramite and Marvel's Abomination. I got to say, this character definitely looks like a blend of the two, maybe, or it's in that overlap where we get an entirely new looking character. Helgramite, of course, a big insect type character that fought Superman a lot. Abomination, the Hulk enemy. This definitely does not look too much like Abomination. I don't think it looks too much like Helgramite. I can see those ears that look like Abomination ears. I can see those mandibles from Helgramite. This one's a pretty good combination, I would say. Mix is a character that puzzles me a little bit about why this character is the way that it is, or how the choices were made, because Mix is an amalgamation of DC's Mr. Mxyzptlk and Marvel's Wong, and that seems like an unintuitive combination. Now, I understand Doctor Strange Fate needs an assistant, so you have to involve Wong in this character a little bit, because you need Doctor Strange Fate's assistant to be an amalgamation of Wong and another character. Dr. Fate doesn't necessarily have an obvious sidekick to blend in there. How they landed on Mxyzptlk, I'll never know. And more importantly, the obvious combination, maybe the combination fans like me really wanted, is Mr. Mxyzptlk blended with Impossible Man. White Witch, Wanda Zatara, is an amalgamation of DC's Zatanna along with Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff. And I have a nice little compilation photo here that I found on DeviantArt by Dana Holtzbert. She put it together, though this is comic art, I'm pretty sure. But when you look at the two, this is another combination that works great. I mean, this is a combination where the White Witch absolutely looks like a character who could stand on her own. I mean, you can clearly see the Scarlet Witch and the Zatara influences when you look at them all lined up like this, but you change that color scheme of the bodysuit there at the torso from red to white. It's basically Scarlet Witch's, which is not dissimilar to what Zatara's would look like if she didn't have the fancy dinner jacket on there. You have just a hint of Wanda's headdress there with that headband underneath the hair. You bring in the fishnet stockings from Zatara, and you add this white streak in her hair. I'm not really sure where this comes from, but it certainly looks a lot like Rogue to me. Angel Hawk is another one of those obvious combinations. Warren Hall is Angel Hawk, an amalgamation of DC's Hawkman, Carter Hall, and Marvel's Angel, Warren Worthington III. I don't know that there's a whole lot to say about this. It's a guy with wings. He's got Hawkman's helmet, and the suit is a little more Angel than it is Hawkman. So that's a pretty good blend of two characters that are a lot alike to start with. Apollo, Ray Summers, is an amalgamation of DC's Ray and Marvel's Cyclops. And when you take a look here, this one is another one that looks a whole lot like one character. This looks like Cyclops. The power set, he's using Cyclops power. This could just be an alternate costume for Cyclops. I don't really see much Ray there. And, I pull up a picture of the Ray to look at, and I guess that suit has a little bit of similarity, but once again, that one is just, Apollo is just Cyclops to me. In a similar vein, but in a different direction, we've got the Aqua Mariner. And the way it's spelled, I cannot help but want to pronounce it Aqua Mariner. But the Aqua Mariner is a combination, of course, of Aquaman from DC, the Submariner from Marvel, and once again, this is all Aquaman in what you're seeing here. There is so much Aquaman present in this character design. The hairstyle's got a little homage to the Submariner, of course, and he does have the wings on his feet, so I guess that means something. But at the end of the day, this is one that is way heavier on the Aquaman than it is on the Submariner. Now, next up, we've got a trio here, and this trio confuses me a little bit. But in the foreground, we've got Canary. And Canary is known as Dinah Barton. She's an amalgamation of DC's Black Canary, Dinah Lance, and Marvel's Mockingbird, Barbara Barton. And that's a combination that I think is pretty obvious. Not only is it obvious, I think that Black Canary was absolutely an inspiration for the creation of the character Mockingbird, so it makes sense that those would be together. Now, in the background here, I'm a little more confused because we have Goliath, known as Oliver Queen, which is an amalgamation of DC's Oliver Queen and Marvel's Goliath. And then in the middle there, we have Hawkeye, Clint Archer, an amalgamation of DC's Green Arrow, who is also Oliver Queen, and Marvel's Hawkeye. Now, the Green Arrow-Hawkeye combination makes absolute sense, but some may also argue that they're too similar and that it doesn't do a good job to combine those. But at the same time, you got to do what you got to do. What I don't understand is how Oliver Queen got two characters. But then again, if characters are merged, maybe they take half of each character, put them together, and that leaves another half to play with. They don't really stick to their own rules that well as this story goes along. But these are all good characters. The problem is that Canary is made up of the wife of Oliver Queen and the wife of Hawkeye, or at least the love interest of Oliver Queen and Hawkeye. So I would assume that her romantic interest in this comic is going to be Hawkeye here, but there's still Oliver Queen, so maybe this is their polyamorous relationship, and that is not the topic of this episode. Captain Marvel is maybe the most fun, most obvious amalgamation, because you have Captain Marvel from Marvel, you have Captain Marvel from DC, you put them together, and you call the character Captain Marvel. Now, just for clarification, I'm going to refer to DC's Captain Marvel as Shazam, Marvel's Captain Marvel as Mar-Vell. And when you take a look at this costume, you really have a good combination. You have the color scheme of Mar-Vell, Mar-Vell's original green and white color scheme. You have Shazam's lightning bolt on the chest with, of course, the color swapped. I think they've managed to get rid of the cape, which is a little closer to how Mar-Vell's costume looked. But then when we look at that face, that is a Shazam face on the character. I love this combination. I'm giving them an A on this one. Firebird, Beatrice Gray, is an amalgamation of DC's Fire, Beatrice Jocasta, and Marvel's Phoenix, Jean Grey. And when you look at this is a pretty good matchup. I'm seeing both of those characters in this new character design. Also in this panel, among lots and lots of background characters, we do see there in the foreground Mercury, Pietro Pete Allen. He's an amalgamation of DC's Impulse, Bart Allen, and Marvel's Quicksilver, Pietro Maximoff. And we knew they had to combine a Flash with Quicksilver. We just didn't know which Flash it was going to be until this came out, so it's Impulse, Bart Allen, sort of the Flash from the future, if you will. Jocasta is our next character here, and Jocasta is an amalgamation of DC's Platinum of the Metal Men with Marvel's Jocasta, the Sentinels, and Millie the Model. And honestly, I see more of a blend between Jocasta and the Sentinels than I really see anything about Platinum from the Metal Men. And I just think it's cool that they credit Millie the Model here as being one aspect of that character's amalgamation, because Millie the Model is one of those fun Archie Comics type characters that Marvel put out that has transitioned over the years to be into the main Marvel 616. Mr. X, John Jones, is an amalgamation of DC's Martian Manhunter, John Jones, and Marvel's Professor X, Charles Xavier. And like I said before with Oliver Queen, he gets mixed into a couple of different characters here. We've got another little fragment of Charles Xavier into this character. When I look at this character, I don't see Martian Manhunter and I don't see Professor X. I just see a guy. So I don't know if that means it succeeds or fails. I'll just leave that up to you to decide. Runaway is an amalgamation of DC's Gypsy and Marvel's Rogue. And this is another incident where I look at this character and all I'm seeing is Rogue. Now, I guess she does have a little flowing sash around her waist. That headband has a little flowing tail to it that you wouldn't typically see on Rogue. But you could just tell me this is Rogue in an alternate costume, and I would believe it. It might help if I knew a little bit more about Gypsy. I mean, I don't really think Gypsy's a household name character. So I looked at a picture, and she does have the flowing headband, so I guess that's a nod to Gypsy. I think they could have done better if maybe they had put like the flowing skirt that Gypsy wears on Runaway to give a little more Gypsy. You could have stuck with the Rogue color scheme, but just put a little more Gypsy into that combination. Next up, we have WillMagnus, an amalgamation of DC's WillMagnus and Marvel's Bolivar Trask, two just kind of science guys, so you can make this just look like a guy, give him a costume. You've got Jocasta there, which is part of the Metal Men. You've got the Sentinels, which Bolivar Trask is the creator of the Sentinels. So I guess it flows well together. An obvious enough combination. I don't know. I don't really give much thought to the WillMagnus character from Amalgam. Wraith is another one of the super cool looking characters. And Wraith is an amalgamation of DC's Obsidian. Thus you get that really dark tone there to the character in terms of the coloration that they use for him and those purple boots. And then, of course, you combine it with Gambit. Gambit has his own purple, his own trench coat. This is not a combination I ever would have thought of, but the character absolutely looks cool on the page. Huntress, known as Carol Danvers in the Amalgam universe, is a combination of DC's Huntress, as the name suggests, and Marvel's Carol Danvers. And this is the Miss Marvel phase of Carol Danvers. These are two characters that I don't know how well they go together because Miss Marvel has a whole lot of superpowers. Huntress is a vigilante with a crossbow, but it makes for a nice character design. I think they more or less just took Huntress and gave her blonde hair. Hyena. This one is super interesting to me. Hyena Creed H. Quinn, an amalgamation of DC's Joker, who once used the alias Harlan Quinn, and Marvel's Sabretooth, Victor Creed. Now, first, giving him the original name Hyena automatically makes me think of Harley Quinn, because Harley Quinn and her pet hyenas, they're pretty noteworthy. And then the character's name, his last name is Quinn, middle initial H. Once again, getting some Harley Quinn vibes. I got to tell you, the way that the green hair is popping off the back of this character, and I know that is a bit of a Sabretooth thing, but with the green color, I'm suddenly starting to think of the Creeper. And this, you could almost tell me this character was a combination of Kraven the Hunter and the Creeper, and I would believe it about the same. But it's a nice, cool, fun-looking character, a way to make the Joker physically intimidating, I suppose. This is one of the most fun characters. This is a character who blends so well. The look is perfect. It's Sparrow, Jubilation Lee, an amalgamation of the Tim Drake version of Robin and Marvel's Jubilee. And then also, when you put those two characters together, you give us a character that brings to mind Carrie Kelly as well. So this is just fun on a lot of different levels. Jubilee's trench coat and Robin's cape, essentially the same color. This just works on so many levels. I really like Sparrow. Green Skull is a lot of fun. Green Skull is the combination of Lex Luthor and Red Skull. Now, why the Red Skull turned green, I don't have a good answer for. Maybe an obsession with green kryptonite. I don't know. We've got the purple vest there with the green skin. It does kind of maintain the color scheme of Lex Luthor's power armor from the 80s. So I think this is overall a good character creation. Definitely looks scary and creepy. Ultra Metallo is an amalgamation of DC's Metallo and Marvel's first sleeper. And, you know, it's just a big giant killer robot, World War II era, enemy of Super Soldier, and pretty aggressive there with that Nazi sign right out front on the chest. Couple more fun characters here. Baron Zero, Wolfgang von Strucker, is an amalgamation of DC's Mr. Freeze, who was originally known as Mr. Zero, and Marvel's Baron von Strucker, of course. Madam Cat, also seen in this panel, Selena Luthor, is an amalgamation of Catwoman and Madam Hydra. And I got to say that when I'm looking at Baron Zero, he really looks a lot more Mr. Freeze to me than he does Baron Zemo. And then, of course, the Madam Hydra mixed with Selena Kyle. We already had another Selena Kyle character we talked about, but it's just, you know, skin-tight green hubba-hubba factor going on there. Black Bat is a fun character. It's an amalgamation of Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, and Marvel's Black Cat, Felicia Hardy. This amalgamated character was named Barbara Gordon Hardy. This one looks a lot more Batgirl, I think, than it does Black Cat. And Black Cat, you would almost want to be mixed with Catwoman, with Selena Kyle. That is an obvious combination. We've already seen Selena Kyle used a couple of times, so maybe they needed something else to bring into the Black Cat character. Deathlock, Jason Todd. This is an amalgamation of DC's Jason Todd and Marvel's Deathlock. So when you look at this, it's a cyborg. Deathlock's a cyborg. It's got a little red on it, so it could be Red Hood. Not really the best angle to comment on. This could almost just be generic robot bad guy in the background, though. Now, a real fun character is Moonwing. Moonwing, known as Dick Grayson, an amalgamation of DC's Nightwing and Marvel's Moon Knight. And when you look at that, it is, once again, it's Moon Knight with a little bit of Nightwing's coloration. They got a little darker band around the shoulders as some more Nightwing inspiration, but this one, way more Moon Knight than it is Nightwing. Nuke, Bane Simpson, an amalgamation of DC's Bane and Marvel's Nuke. Not a combination I would expect them to come up with. You can see here that this version of Nuke is a member of Hydra. He has the Bane face mask. Looks a little bit more Bane. Nuke, best known for that American flag face tattoo. It's a shame to cover it up with Bane's mask. The Punisher, Trevor Castle, is a non-intuitive combination of DC's Steve Trevor and Marvel's The Punisher. Also, you can see in the foreground of this picture, Diana Prince, which is Princess Diana of Themyscira, who's supposed to be an amalgamation of Wonder Woman and Elektra. I don't see any Elektra in this. This is just Wonder Woman in street clothes. Granny Harkness. I just got to put this one out there because I love Granny Goodness, because it's just kind of a ridiculous character name more than anything. Granny Harkness is an amalgamation of DC's Granny Goodness, Marvel's Agatha Harkness, and she looks a little bit more Granny Goodness than Agatha Harkness in this picture. I mean, is she going to slam that baby to the ground? That is a very villainous villain, if you ask me. Now, my instincts tell me to pronounce this character Thorion, because it's Thor, and Orion, it's probably Thorion. But Thorion is tough for me to say. I say Thorion every time I see it. But it's a combination of the new god Orion and, of course, the Avenger Thor. And it works. It makes sense. Thanoside, a bit of a redundancy of the Department of Redundancy department here, because it's a combination of Thanos and Darkseid. Thanos, very obviously a reskin of Darkseid for Marvel. Jim Starlin will admit to that. And then to put the two together, that's pretty obvious. Not the highest quality picture I found here, but you do have those infinity symbols in between what look like infinity gauntlets. And, of course, the Darkseid headdress. The chin is a little bit Thanos, a little bit Darkseid. This one works pretty well because you don't really have to change either character very much to get the new one. Bismuth. For some reason, Bismuth is what happens when they believe Snapper Jones just has to be in this crossover event. He's an amalgamation of 10 of the Metal Men, along with Snapper Carr from DC, General DC Comics and the Daily Planet, and Marvel's Toad and Rick Jones. You look at this, pretty forgettable little android character, if you ask me. This is another beautiful character that looks like it could be an original character. It's Kokoro Tatsu Betty Braddock, an amalgamation of DC's Katana Tatsu Yamashiro and Marvel's Psylocke Elizabeth Ray Betsy Braddock. And this character looks totally new. Doesn't look that much like Katana, doesn't look that much like Psylocke, but I can clearly see the influences of both of those. This is a character I would love as a new standalone character. Magneto, yet another amalgam character involving Magneto. He's known as Eric Magnus. So WillMagnus and Magneto blended together. WillMagnus has already blended once with Bolivar Trask. Now he blends with Magneto because this is an amalgamation of WillMagnus and Magneto. He leads the Magnetic Men instead of the Metal Men. Speed Demon. This might be the coolest character. I think I've said that before. Maybe I mean it this time. But Speed Demon might be the coolest character from here, at least the character design. This is the character you really want to get tattooed on your chest to show off to people. He's a combination of the Flash, the Barry Allen version of the Flash from DC, Marvel's Ghost Rider. This character's name is Blaze Allen, as a combination of Johnny Blaze and Barry Allen. And this is the poster you really want to put up inside your locker at the gym, I guess. With zero inspiration, zero originality, they said, hey, we're going to combine DC Scarecrow with Marvel Scarecrow and create a character called the Scarecrow, because I guess if you've seen one Scarecrow, you've seen them all. Uatu the Guardian is a fun character, an amalgamation of DC's Guardians of the Universe, Guardians of Oa, and Marvel's Uatu the Watcher. And you put them together and you get this fun character that looks a whole lot like both of its inspirations. And you can see here, he's warning this group called Challengers of the Fantastic that Galactiac is coming. So we'll talk about Challengers of the Fantastic. They first appeared in Challengers of the Fantastic #1 as an amalgamation of DC's Challengers of the Unknown and Marvel's Fantastic Four. And with the team dynamic and the costumes that the respective teams wore, this is another obvious matchup. What's not so obvious is when you take a look here at this picture, it looks like Dr. Octopus is mixed with Reed Richards there for some reason. You've got Ben Grimm back there with 4 arms, so maybe that isn't as obvious, but the team mashup is obvious. And, of course, Galactiac, none other than Galactus of Marvel combined with Brainiac of DC. That makes sense. Galactus likes to eat planets. Brainiac likes to shrink them and put them in bottles. A character I was very disappointed with is Bizarnage. Bizarnage is allegedly an amalgamation of DC's Bizarro and Marvel's Carnage, but when I take a look, I see a white symbiote. I don't see any Bizarro in here. I also think the coolest thing about Carnage, the thing that sets Carnage apart from the other symbiotes, is his color scheme. So you take that away, give us this solid white symbiote. That is neither Carnage nor Bizarro to me. Insect Queen. Insect Queen is an amalgamation of the Insect Queen persona of Lana Lang from DC and Marvel's Mary Jane Watson. And you get it here. You've got Mary Jane's red hair. You've got the Insect Queen costume that's got the hubba hubba cranked up just a little bit. And you get a nice character. It's basically Mary Jane in a superhero costume. King Lizard is an amalgamation of DC's King Shark and Marvel's Lizard, and this one's pretty disappointing to me because it just looks like a different way to draw the lizard. I don't see any King Shark at all when I look at this character. I mean, the teeth are there, but that's it. X-Patrol was a combination of X-Men and Doom Patrol. I think this is nice and this is clever because of all the similarities those two teams had in the early Silver Age. In fact, some people have gone so far as to say perhaps the Doom Patrol were the inspiration for the X-Patrol. But I think that's a nice little team mashup. Bat-Thing, Kirk Salas, is an amalgamation of DC's Man-Bat, Kirk Langstrom, and Marvel's Man-Thing, Ted Salas. And this is not one that I would have found to be obvious. I would think maybe Man-Bat would be a better combination with a character like the Lizard or the Vulture. And I would have thought the obvious choice is Swamp Thing and Man-Thing and call it Thing. But that didn't happen. So here we go. I see a lot of Man-Bat here. The green coloration makes me think of Man-Thing, but I don't really think of Man-Thing, if you follow me there. Lady Talia is a combination of Talia al Ghul from DC and Lady Deathstrike from Marvel. And this is another one looks fairly like an original character. You put the claws on her, it makes her cool. I think Lady Talia is a way more interesting character than Lady Deathstrike. But you put the two together, you have them fight Darkclaw there, and you're going to have a winner. Generation Hex was a combination of the team Generation X and Jonah Hex. It featured one character, Aurora Trigger, which is an amalgamation of DC's Trigger Twins, or at least Wayne Trigger of the Trigger Twins, along with Aurora from Marvel. You get Jono Hex, who is an amalgamation of Jonah Hex and Marvel's Chamber, known as Jono Starsmore. And then you've also got here, you can see Johnny Random, an amalgamation of DC's Johnny Thunder and Marvel's Random. Here we got a cool picture of a cool character, Fin Fang Flame, an amalgamation of DC's Brimstone and Marvel's Fin Fang Foom. And this character just works because it's really scary and intimidating. Iceberg is an amalgamation of DC's Ice and Marvel's Iceman. And they're really just the same character, the same power set. So much is the same between those two characters. The only difference is the gender. I think it's a little wasteful almost to combine those two because what you get could just be Ice instead of Iceberg. Red Vision, I think this one's my favorite. Maybe I mean it this time. I don't know. But Red Vision, an amalgamation of the leading android from each company, DC's Red Tornado and Marvel's Vision. We have Ambush the Lunatic, who is Ambush Bug combined with Lunatic from Marvel. DC's Ambush Bug, of course. And this takes Ambush Bug, a really silly character, makes him big and physically imposing. If you look up here, we also get Al Forbush. Al Forbush, a combination of Al from DC Comics and Forbush Man from Marvel Comics. And we also see a little bit of Lobo the Duck there. So let's go ahead and talk about Lobo the Duck, an amalgamation of DC's Lobo and Marvel's Howard the Duck. And I take it all back. This one's my favorite. I'm serious this time. This one, Lobo the Duck, is my favorite. And you look at that, and it shouldn't be hard to tell why. This is just the coolest character ever, the most WTF combination you could have of characters. Wrapping it up with a few more, we have Human Lantern, who's an amalgamation of DC's Golden Age Green Lantern, Alan Scott, and Marvel's Golden Age Android Human Torch, Jim Hammond. And I just like that. It really looks like green fire. You take Jim Hammond, you turn him green, you give him Alan Scott's cape and pants, and that one's just fun and simple, and I really love that one. You have Silver Racer, who's an amalgamation of DC's Black Racer and Marvel's Silver Surfer. Here's one. You can't help but see a whole lot of Silver Surfer here, but he does have the skis of Black Racer rather than the surfboard of Silver Surfer, and he's got a little high-collared cape going on there. Iron Lantern is one that amazes me how well it works. And it amazes me because it is not a combination I would have thought was natural. I wouldn't expect Tony Stark and Hal Jordan to go together so well. Iron Man's powers so different than the Green Lantern's powers. I would expect the Green Lantern to be merged with Nova. I would expect Iron Man to be combined with somebody like Steel, John Henry Irons. But they didn't do that. They avoided the obvious, and they gave us what might be the coolest character. I mean it this time. Seriously, this might be the coolest character from Amalgam Comics. Also, we can see a couple of cool supporting characters. We have Hector, the highly evolved creature totes oriented for revenge, an amalgamation of DC's Hector Hammond and Marvel's MODOK. The two big head guys ought to be amalgamated. That makes sense to me. And then also up in the corner, we have Happy Kalmaku, who's an amalgamation of Happy Hogan, the #1 sidekick for Tony Stark, and Thomas Kalmaku, the character once known as Pie Face, the #1 sidekick of Hal Jordan. You put those two together, and that works well, too. And then finally, I'm going to end with Paste Eater Pete. He's an amalgamation of DC's Matter Eater Lad, Marvel's Paste Pot Pete, two of my favorite ridiculous characters mixed together in one character that for some reason is not that ridiculous other than I imagine he eats paste, and that's his superpower. Hey, I could be a superhero if that's all it takes. There are many, many more characters, but I really started to fade after a while. Maybe I'll do a part 2 someday, but the question lingers, will we ever see a resurgence of Amalgam? And I would say no. It's not likely because it would require cooperation between Disney and Warner Media, but maybe it will happen. Sometimes stranger things have happened. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Please let me know what you think down in the comments. Please like and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. And remember, heroes are super.